Hi, my name is Leo Manahan. Welcome to Cooking with Leo. Today I'm going to show you a nice, basic, easy dish that you can make at home. Maybe 3 to 4 ingredients at the most. Very basic, very rudimentary, easy to put together. It's called ratatouille. I'm sure most of y'all have heard of the movie at least, and that was really the biggest inspiration for me when it came to making this. So, without ado, I'd like to start. So we're going to start with cutting this eggplant, aubergine as they call it in French. And with a young eggplant like this, you have the choice on whether you want to peel the skin or not, because at this age, with how young it is and how small it is, that skin isn't very thick. So you could serve this completely unpeeled as it is if you'd like, but with a nice one of those big real egg-shaped eggplants, you have to watch yourself because the peels on those are super thick and bitter. But if it's what you prefer, you don't have to peel it at all. Me, I'm not going to. I'm only going to use half of this aubergine as well. Put it with that zucchini. And then, classical French method for preparing ratatouille, we have me chopping every single thing into nice thin discs. But right now, I'm just going to do this eggplant in nice thin coins like this. And just go like that. Nice chewy bits. Nothing too thick or chunky. Nothing really too chewy, but just enough to still give it some structure while keeping it nice and mouth melting as you bite it. So here I am, cutting these little just eggplant slivers. Get these frying up. So, a lot of ratatouille, classical ratatouille, especially when you make it, we'll have it everything cut into nice small thin circles, then layered in a little pot and then baked with tomato sauce underneath. But my style of a ratatouille is going to be a little less effortful, I should say. This is just going to pretty much be like a nice fried spaghetti with a bit of tomato sauce on top. So there we have all of our sliced eggplant right there. Now I'm going to get started on this courgette, or zucchini as they call it. So for the zucchini, although I just said normally we cut everything in the same usual circles, with this one I'm going to cut it into, so normally I do it like this, but just to add a little bit of variety, I'm going to take it, cut it in half, then maybe cut it again into half into quarters, and then we'll make nice little triangles out of it like that. So then we have some shape contrast, maybe a little smaller pieces, but it's a little bit of more variety than your usual. So you're nice, take a nice look at that. It's our nice circular pieces of eggplant right here, compared to our triangular zucchini. So just cut up a little more zucchini. A little bit thicker to compensate for being smaller than those eggplants, but not too much, not by too much. So with that, we have all of our root vegetables done up. So with that, I'm gonna get started on these peppers as well while we're cutting. So let's see, for this, I'm gonna show off another nice knife technique I learned in school. So, nice, simple way to add some different colors, and when you're feeling a little lazier when it comes to your knife work, it's called a paysanne cut. So, you want to take your pepper, cut at a bit of an angle, and cut triangles and wedges out of it. So I've got these angled pieces like this, like little diamonds almost. In French they call it the peasant cut because it's supposedly the most unrefined, but when used properly, it adds a nice bit of shape and just different visual appeal to the food you're cooking. So, as you can see, even though most things in nature are round and, grow in rather unnatural shapes, a large part of cooking is really turning those natural things into man-made sort of things, I turn this incredibly rounded yellow pepper into diamond diced pieces. Really, a large part of cooking I find is trying to make a statement with it. You're taking pieces of nature and turning it into some sort of expression. Like, I'm hungry, really. And then we take a vegetable out of the ground, turn it into food. Me, I'm turning all these vegetables into food, but specifically shaped food. Triangles, circles, but everything. All the different colors. Instead of paint and canvas, you have vegetables on a cutting board. To me, this is my art. So then, got all the stuff we're gonna saute. Add a little red pepper in there for a little extra color. So, big thing, preference-wise, some people do like the flavor, but usually you should always try to pick out all the white stuff in the middle of the pepper, just to remove any unpleasant texture or anything like that and make it a little easier to chew. So let's see. Now with these red peppers, I'm not going to do them the same way I did the yellow ones. I'm probably just going to do a nice straight square dice with it. Just keep them in nice sort of chunks like this. Fairly even, but more rectangular than angled compared to the others. I remember reading something a few days ago, you know. Chaos is the order of nature, but law is the order of man. Well, that's how I feel, because you're taking all of these sort of random, spontaneous vegetables that grow however they feel like and trying to make them into consistent and ordered pieces. See, a lot of it comes to do with the fact that if you cut all your vegetables inconsistently, all different sizes, it cooks really badly. Have one really hard pepper here, one overcooked pepper there. Doesn't really add much to the flavor. So as much as you might have different styles, as long as you keep it all consistent in some way or another, it should all cook very well and taste perfect, or at least the way you would expect it to. So right here, I think what I am going to do is probably try to cut these into nice thick circles, because these tomatoes are going to be just sort of like a big part of the base of the ratatouille, because the ratatouille is a meatless stew. So I'm going to add some nice thick tomato pieces like this so that people have something nice and meaty to put into their mouth when they eat it. And then with this, I'll probably do a nice cut in half. So now I've got just about everything ready to saute. Finally gonna get started on this onion as well. And thanks to the fact that I'm cooking nothing but vegetables today, I got no real worries of cross-contamination. Can't really get salmonella from an onion to a cucumber or something like that. So I'm just gonna give that a quick cut. Take that really thin outside peel off so it cooks a little better and has better flavor. And then I'm going to do a nice thin cut, turn it into shreds and ribbons called julienne. So sort of like those really thin like hickory sticks you might get at the store. This is a julienne onion, nice and thin, almost like a caramelized onion you get on a nice greasy burger or something like that. But we're not going to be caramelizing this one. We're just going to go for a light saute, give everything a little bit of color, get some of the sugars in the bottom of the pan, all the caramelized flavor, and then I'm going to use a little bit of wine to pull it all off, pour it into the tomato sauce, and infuse those flavors into the dish. So with that, now I need our old handy dandy friend, garlic. Always goes hand in hand with onions, you know, both grow on the ground, have a lot of sulfur, usually pretty good for your mineral health and things like that. A little bit of this in there will, you know, help you get those tiny little extra antioxidants and nutrients. There's a whole lot of hype these days about things like superfoods and all these, and getting all your vitamins and all the antioxidants from acai berries and all these things, but fact of the matter is a lot of the common household foods we have and own already have a lot of those compounds in them. Oranges, citrus, those are all similar things to antioxidants that do a lot of the functions that they do. Those superfoods have a very, very, very overhyped reputation, but they're fruits and vegetables like anything else on earth. Here, this is a nice basic dish from the southern regions of France. People would consider it a peasant dish, but it's healthy. There's so many things in it that, you know, would just be so good for your health. There's a whole talk about the Mediterranean diet. Well, this is a lot of the ingredients in it. You got your garlic and onions for your antioxidants and a lot of the nutrients you need for those minerals. Then you have all these other vegetables with all of the fiber and the water and all the vitamins within the soil that they have. And you put all these into a nice rich stew and combine that all together, it's like a superfood right there, really. And I think this is just used to be something that French grandmas and grandpas used to make for their kids, and French moms would make for their children when they got nothing but veggies and tomatoes in the fridge. They just go down to the market, grab some fresh cucumber or some fresh zucchini, eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, toss it all together, make a nice little home meal. In a sense, this is also like something like Ma just used to make, you know, something like a nice spaghetti dish or something that people always hold on to or make when they got nothing else. It's always a nice comfort food when you really got no other ingredients. So, I'm gonna crank the heat on my wok now. Get this hot. Now we're gonna get it oiled up a little. Traditionally, when it comes to making ratatouille, you'd put a bit of tomato sauce on the bottom, then your sliced up vegetables in perfect circles all arranged, overlapping over one another. But for the sake of so that most people can do it at home, I'm just showing you a nice simple adaptation of it. It's almost more like a spaghetti sauce than really a pure ratatouille, but if you can learn this one, you can learn the real style, the harder style on your own time whenever you feel. But here, this is our base point for the average home cook who doesn't know these sorts of things. So for the most part, all of the vegetables I have in this little bowl here are about the same texture, consistency, size, moisture level. So if I throw it all in at once, it should all cook at roughly about the same time. The only thing is the eggplant maybe, but I cut it thin so it would match about these in cooking temperature. But for the most part, if you have any thick or woodier vegetables, maybe this eggplant, you'd want to get those cooked first, salt it a bit more so that you get the moisture out before you add your other thinner ingredients like onions, peppers, things like that, that will crisp very quickly. With eggplant, it holds a lot of moisture, which means it won't brown very well unless you salt it or cook it with decent heat, or at least cook it a little bit before everything else. So, right now, it should be good for this to go. So right now, I'm just gonna add my onions in here. We'll add a little bit of everything, actually. Let's see. So, nice ratatouille here. Got all those different colors there. Different vegetables. Here, get those all arranged in the pan a little better. Toss a little more aubergine in there. Cut a few slices. Finish this off, maybe. So, back to this. Thin slices again, mostly so that I don't really have to pre-cook this one as much. So, get this all laid out in the pan. Give everything a little just quick pre-salting. Then toss it around in the oil a little bit. Get it all going. Get that salt mixed up with everything, because salt doesn't just affect the eggplant. Salt will also draw the moisture out of all the other vegetables as well and help it start to cook and caramelize a little faster. So then we just leave that. Crank this heat up. Now, just play the waiting game. So normally with ratatouille, as I said, you'd take a nice big earthen dish or something, fill the bottom up with some tomato sauce, and then bake it all together. You know, you bake the sauce, you bake the veggies together with it as well. Get it all nice and even, so it's almost more like a casserole or something that you would serve. But there are many ways to skin. There's the saying, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, there's 1,000 ways to make a ratatouille. As I said, the variations are endless, going from kitchen to kitchen, mama to mama, restaurant to restaurant, region to region even. It'd be very hard to pick one definitive way to make ratatouille. So, while we let the food wait, I guess I could drill everyone on some facts. So a lot of these vegetables are pretty good for what they are. A lot of people say that these are all peasant ingredients or that they're so lowbrow or something, but simplicity is the best, honestly. Doesn't have to be some super fancy brand of tomato from there. It can just be from your farmer's market or someone down the street. A lot of these dishes have something lost in translation when it comes to that. When we hear foreign words or ratatouille, we think it has to be exactly the way it's made in a restaurant or exactly the way it was made by the recipe classically, but in the places where these recipes came from, it's just food. It's really just, how do I make it? Okay, well, what do I make it with? Does my family like it with squash instead of zucchini? Does my family not like the eggplant so much? Should I try a different eggplant? Like, the little things like that make almost every single ratatouille, even from the same place, different. A lot of the things in food like that, that's where the devil really is in those details, right? How you like it or what you like. Now anyways, we're gonna cut back to this now that all the oil is sizzling and the heat's going again. See, now you can just hear it all sizzling, you see the colors, you see moisture starting to come out of everything a little bit now that the color on this eggplant is kind of went from that solid sort of color to that translucence, like especially like right there. Compared to this, so then what that is the moisture is leaving the surface and like escaping through the rest of it as the sort of walls of the plant or the vegetable are starting to break down from the heat and softening, of course. After a certain point, when the moisture is all drained out from the surface of the vegetable, that's when it starts to caramelize, because the liquids and the sugars that have went to the outside of the vegetable are starting to scorch to the pan or caramelize, darken, what have you. So really with this, I don't think I want to go too dark with it. You don't really want to saute it too brown, but you want a little bit of color for the flavor, but it should be a nice light braised dish, because when you saute something and you add those dark sugars to it, you can have a chance of making the flavor more complex and stronger. But you also have a chance to make it a little more bitter too as well. Especially if you overcook it and you over saute it to the point where you have black stuff on the bottom of your pan. But I digress. We're only going to do a little bit so that I can just get a little bit of caramelized sugar from the natural vegetable flavor to mix in with the white wine as I put it in, the red wine as I pour it in. So now I will just add a little more oil, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some of my herbs and spices to it to break all of those flavors down into the oil and then incorporate it into the vegetable, because every time you cook something in a pan like this, it always absorbs a bit of the oil to replace whatever moisture was lost for that reaction I mentioned, the caramelization. So if I take this oil and I put some of these herbs and spices in it, and it breaks down these herbs and spices to extract the oils out of the leaves, well, that mixes the two different oils together. So I have these oregano spices, these oregano leaves, put it into the oil like that. I'm not putting too much, just for the flavor, just to flavor the oil rather than the whole dish. But you have a little bit of that. You have all of these ingredients breaking down in the oil a bit to infuse it together, so that as the oil is absorbed, so is the oil of your herbs and spices. So that means the flavor really penetrates into the food itself. Okay, so I just added some thyme, some basil, and now I just threw in some fennel seeds. So when it comes to a lot of these ingredients I have here, like fennel seed and coriander, they tend to be very strong, so you want to put a fraction of what you put compared to the other ingredients. Like basil and oregano, usually you can get away with a lot more of this compared to something like fennel or coriander, because coriander and fennel have those really outstanding tastes. Fennel almost kind of strikes some people as licorice. So you only really need a little bit of it with something like this to sort of cut through all the natural richness and the strength of the vegetables, because the tomatoes will carry a lot of savory content, maybe a bit of sweetness, but you add the fennel to sort of add like a sort of aftertone to the flavor as a whole. So now we're going to toss that basil in. So the funny thing is, I always see a lot of people talk about, using essential oils and, using that to impact their health and getting all the natural vitamins and nutrients out of these herbs and spices. I just created essential oil in this pan, except you can eat it. Because really all those oils really are is the fragrance and the scent, of course, of all those fresh herbs and ingredients, but broken down in the oil. I just took olive oil, mixed all these ingredients for essential oil essentially into it, mixed it into my vegetables, and now we have this. It just amazes me sometimes. People love this sort of thing. They love the smell of oregano. They love oil. They love basil, this and that, you know. Oh, I just cured my cold with some oregano oil and some basil, but people neglect one of the simplest ways to absorb those things. You can't really drink most of the essential oils. You rub it on yourself or put it in a diffuser, but with this, you can eat it. You can smell it right now as it's cooking. And you can look at it too, because really, it's a multi-sensory thing compared to just eating it. Food as a whole should be almost a five-dimensional, five sense experience. You can smell it, maybe not through the camera, but you can hear it. You can see it. And if you were here with me, you could feel it as you eat it. But since we can't do that, you can't taste or feel this, I can only sub in with the rest of the senses. That's really the biggest key, is to have a purpose when you're cooking. Know what you want to cook for, right? Am I cooking to stuff my stomach? Do I want to get some good nutrients in me? Like this, I picked this because it's chock full of vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all these great summer vegetables that usually grow as roots, you know. And even something like this itself is so versatile, right? Like I probably could have gotten away with completely different ingredients so long as the preparation was close, but there's so many different types of vegetables within the same family. I could have used yellow squash, I could have used orange squash, I could have used different eggplants, Japanese eggplant, Asian eggplant, English eggplant. I could have used so many different ingredients for my dish here, but I stuck with that. The simple basics, but reinvented in a different way. So now that all my vegetables are sizzling and going, I'm gonna add my minced garlic in. Just because garlic tends to burn very fast, so I usually like to add it a little later in. Now that everything's already got some color, I'm just gonna toss this garlic in. Now, normally, a lot of people would like their garlic a little smaller, a little better than that, but I plan to just cook the whole thing enough so that the pieces of garlic are nice and tender and you just get all that flavor. It might as well just flow and integrate into the sauce itself, but a little bit of extra character never hurt anything. Now that we've got this garlic going, I'm gonna cut up the rest of this tomato and get it ready before I toss it in the pot. I'm gonna go like this. Probably take these tomato wedges, give them a nice saute as well. See, tomatoes are very, very good for savory cooking. Like you add a little bit of tomato to anything, a bit of gravy, spaghetti sauce, something. It's just perfect because tomatoes have a lot of natural sugars, and those natural sugars usually break down into something called glutamic acid when you cook it. High amounts of glutamic acid are usually found in foods to be considered umami or savory, delicious. But a lot of umami in and of itself, although it can be defined and discovered within an ingredient or a dish as a component, umami really is just a word for a balance of all the different flavors. So, with that, I'm gonna go back to here, add my tomatoes in right here. You just hear that nice sizzling from these nice juicy tomatoes. They're nice and thick so that they don't totally mash up into my stew when I'm making it, but just the right amount so that it's not too big to chew. Like it should almost be like little pieces of my substitute meat. Instead of maybe beef chunks or something like that, I would rather have tomato chunks. So I'm gonna fry these up like little slices of beef or something. Then I'm gonna add a little extra crushed tomato to sort of bring everything together and make a sauce out of it. Now the big thing is with anything with a lot of moisture, there tends to also be a lot of sugar in it that can burn. So especially with tomatoes, if you don't watch them, they can burn and bitter up any sort of dish you make very quickly if you're not watching or stirring it properly. But right now I'm just trying to fry these tomatoes up on one side, get some nice color on this, on the one half of it, or the other half as best as possible, just so I can get some of it stuck to the pan and then reintegrate it back into the sauce to mix with all the other ingredients. Now, another thing is, once again, since we have lots of moisture in these tomatoes, a little bit of salt to A, add flavor, since it's going to water down the sauce a little bit, and B, to draw that moisture out into the pan to add flavor back in. So we have our salt. Now we're going to give this another nice toss. And now our ratatouille is going. Now, while we're here, I'll show you a few quick tricks for making perfect pasta. Well, perfect for me anyways. So when it comes to pasta, you want your pasta water to taste roughly like soup stock. So enough salt so that you can taste the water on its own, but not so much that, your mouth curls and you sort of cringe when you taste it. Because an often neglected part of making pasta is flavoring the noodles. So you don't have to salt these sauces a lot of the time if you just salt your water properly for your pasta, because your pasta is going to absorb a good part of this water. So I'd say normally the ratio for water to pasta is 1 to 6, but give or take however you want to do it. You just always have to take into the factor that you are going to have some absorption of the water and therefore loss of the water at the top when you toss the pasta in. So now I'm just gonna pick a random number of spaghetti noodles, however much you want to feed your family really, but sticking to that ratio, I'd probably want maybe about this much pasta for that much water, but different strokes, different folks. The best way is one part pasta to 6 parts of water, since it'll absorb the water. But how many people of us are really like that? When I make my spaghetti, I can't ever get enough, so I always toss as much as I humanly can sometimes, really. So maybe a little more salt to the water. There we are. Now we have our pasta going, our ratatouille is ticking away now. So now, as I said about the caramelization, you can see on some of these pieces how there's starting to be a bit of darkness and brownness. Well, not brownness, but like those nice caramelized colors, a little bit of tan on the vegetables now, as well as the tomato color and the tomatoes color and the savoriness. But as you can see, there's already some golden brown on some of my vegetables, a little bit of sear and color, and now we have some stuff starting to sear to the pan, as we were calling. So to get this type of stuff off before it burns and ruins the dish, we have to kind of incorporate it back into the food as fast as possible before the sugar starts to burn. So with that, I'm gonna grab a little bit of red wine here, just a nice blended wine, a little bit of Shiraz, Merlot, everything kind of put together. Just gonna add a little bit of that in. So see these little bark parts I can scrape off here? You're gonna integrate that back into your sauce. A little bit of wine. I love cooking with wine. I love cooking with alcohol too. Sometimes I even like to put the alcohol on the food as well. So, okay, now that you have your reducing liquid in here, you can usually start getting anything sticking to the pan off by stirring it around. I mean, sometimes you might run the risk if you try to scrape it dry, you might even chip some of your pan off, but if you have something wet to loosen all the stuff on the bottom off, it starts mixing right into the liquids again. And now that I have all of these vegetables starting to cook in liquid, they're going to absorb all the flavor of the wine back into it, as well as any flavors cooked to the bottom of the pan. just as well, I'm gonna cook the wine itself as well, so that as the wine cooks, it leaves lots of the ingredients within it, like the flavors, the sulfites, the all that grape flavor and the sugars that are within alcohol naturally. You keep those while reducing the actual liquid content, which means you're sort of distilling the flavor or concentrating it into your dish. Okay, pass the water going. Now another thing is you have to really be careful with certain reduction liquids as well, because if they have high sugar as well, like red wine, you might end up even just burning your pan even worse and cooking your wine to the bottom of it and making it even bitter. So it's good to always keep an eye on your food and keep it stirring. Like sometimes you have to let it sit for a bit so that it does cook on the bottom. Then you need to mix it around to get all those cooked bits mixed in with everything else, so that you don't just have one side dark and one side uncooked. So here we are, starting to look like a nice ratatouille stew. I'm now gonna start adding a bit more of these ingredients back in again. So my salt, my pepper, coriander and such. So coriander is another one. If I remember right, it's related to coriander. It's related to another plant people don't really like much, I know that, but it's a very strong sort of outstanding flavor. You really need to be light with it because it can be like, it's a very herbal, very strong in the mouth. But you need it just to cut through all of these sort of rich flavors. You have lots of oil, lots of tomato, lots of, just heavy things on the mouth, plus all the caramelization and the sugar. So if you want to cut the sugar and, sort of, I don't know how to say it, like sort of add something to sort of go against it, right? A little accent to kind of contrast what you're already tasting. You don't want your coriander to overtake it, because coriander on its own is like biting a whole cilantro, just that really, really strange herbal taste you don't really enjoy so much. And then basil, oregano. These are two of the base ingredients and herbs de Provence, which is the region that ratatouille came from. Where some of the most famous ratatouille should come from, I should say. But a lot of you folks will probably know your basil and oregano more from Italian cooking. Spaghetti, lasagna, pizza sauce, all those sorts of things. If you're noticing any similarities, Provence, this area, all the tomatoes, all the general foods I'm using, very quite similar to Italian cuisine, because the region of France that this dish comes from borders France and is along the Riviera from France to Italy. So therefore this food does have a little overlap with Italy, and a little none, and a little less overlap than you'd expect as well though. Alrighty, so I think I will just add a little more wine just for good luck. Get anything left on the bottom of the pan out. And then from there, just gonna add a little bit of these crushed tomatoes and some of the juices just to sort of bind it together and make it a bit more of a sauce than just a pure stew. So here. Tomato is your little cheat code for anything savory. You have lots of sugar, lots of salt, lots of different sorts of things that you can add to a dish with tomato. It really depends on your imagination. Like the sky's the limit on what you can think of. Some people make tomato-based curry, some people make tomato-based ragu, spaghetti sauce, meatball marinara, all those sorts of things. So you can't ever underrate the importance of the tomato. One of the best things you could use. So now that we have our little bit of extra tomato and the red wine together, turn this into the sauce. As you can tell, my pasta cookery always needs a bit of work. My water always boils over no matter how hard I try. But I will always keep trying. It can always be better. So now we're at this sort of just still point. We got all of our ingredients cooking in here right now. That'll be all those nice root vegetables. A lot of nice vitamin C, anthocyanins, anthocyanthins. Those are antioxidants. All those delicious compounds and sort of nutrients that'll make you healthy. See? People are so scared and they have this phobia of eating their vegetables. I never did. If I put all my vegetables like this, I could eat nothing but vegetables. And it feels great too. So, if you ever have someone fussy that you can't figure out how to cook for, or vegetarian friend, vegan roommate, this dish is perfect. Not a single meat ingredient has to be used. Not a single thing from an animal has to be used. I used olive oil. I used olive oil to fry the veggies, and every single other ingredient was a vegetable. No beef stock, no chicken stock or anything, red wine. And that's where we have our liquid in our stew. But even with the lack of those meat ingredients, you'll still have quite a strong developed flavor because you caramelize all the natural sort of ingredients within the food. So, now that we're done that, all the major cooking is done. All that's really left is the plate. I'm gonna take a bowl of pasta here. Get our plate nice and full of some tasty spaghetti noodles. You could serve this on any sort of noodle, or you don't even have to serve it on noodles at all, honestly. It is a stew, but one of my favorite versions and one of my favorite variations is always just served on a nice bed of pasta. You know, like a nice vegetarian spaghetti or something. That's how I like it. So I'll just try to squeeze in the sides of our pasta so we can get some height when we plate it. So you got it like that. You got a nice square bit of noodles. Don't look so good right now, but now we add our sauce, our ratatouille. So with that, the only thing is my tomato chunks all broke down, but otherwise, looks like it all came rather well. Not the most glamorous ratatouille, but this is a anytime, anywhere type of meal. You can jazz it up or jazz it down as much as you'd like. Ratatouille a la Leo. And with that, I would say that would be our show for today. I is Leo Manahan. If you'd like to watch our show again, you can watch again on Jess FM, Jess TV, or you can download the Jess FM app on Google Play or the iPhone store, or watch us on your Facebook, post us on Instagram, hashtag check me out, I don't know. I'd like to thank our videographer, Dayton Jans. I'd like to thank Pumped Entertainment for producing this show. And I'd like you all to check out pumpedentertainment.com for more news, more scoops, exclusives on the latest events, new episodes of Cooking with Leo, and all the recipes that you for your heart's desire. Well, I was your host.